It's Cover to Cover. I'm Beth.
I'm Naomi.
We're third culture kids.
Talking about Korean books.
It's June, which is Pride Month here in Korea, and we've got a very special guest.
Yeah, we've been trying to get him on for over a year, right?
That's right. We finally got to talk to award-winning literary translator Anton Hur. He's also an outspoken advocate in the local queer community.
I'm sure a lot of you have read his works before, and we've actually talked about many of them on this podcast.
We've talked about his Booker-nominated translations Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung, Park Sang-young's Love in the Big City, and Baek Se-ee's I Want to Die But I Want to Eat Tteokbokki.
We really got to know Anton on a more personal level, learning about his journey as a third culture kid who was born in Sweden and grew up in Ethiopia, Hong Kong, and Korea.
Not to mention his journey from law to translation.
He also let us in on what's the queer Korean book our listeners should check out.
Let's get into it. Hi, Anton. Welcome to the Cover to Cover podcast. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good. We're really excited to have you in the studio.
I'm very honored to be here.
Anton, can you tell us a little bit about your background? You have a very unique upbringing.
Whenever I talk about my background, I think I always try to think about the context of where I am giving the background. But I think if I say something like, oh, my dad worked for Kotra, this audience will understand exactly what that means. So this is the Korea Trade and Investment Promotion Agency. It is like a Korean government agency, half government agency, semi-government agency that has offices around the world, and it promotes small and medium-sized enterprises mostly around the world. And my dad worked there for basically all of his professional life, and that entails going back and forth between Korea and overseas. I was actually born in Sweden on, I think that was his second posting ever, and then we lived in Hong Kong, Ethiopia, and Thailand. And that's how I picked up my English, by going to international schools. But also I attended schools in Korea. So I attended half of elementary school, half of middle school, and half of high school in Korea. And this is the part where everyone glosses over, and they all assume I grew up overseas, but that is not the case. I also did not go to college overseas. So because I'm the IMF generation, and by then everyone was bankrupt and they couldn't send anyone overseas, barely got out of college here in Korea. And so I went to college here. I went to grad school here. I spent my entire adult life here in Korea.
I'm from Hong Kong. When did you?
Cool.
Yeah. When were you in Hong Kong?
I was in Hong Kong. It was around the Asian Games, so it was 1986-ish. Such a long time ago. And I went to Bradbury School. I don't know if you know it.
I don't think I'm familiar with it.
You don't have the accent though, the British accent.
No.
Is that not a thing anymore? Because when I came out of Hong Kong and then I went to an American school in Ethiopia, they were like, oh, you speak like a little English boy. And I'm like, really? And then I dropped the accent because I had to adjust.
My parents, they moved to the U.S. and they lived there for more than a decade. So we grew up in a very sort of American accent speaking household. But I spell everything with a U and everything with an S in it.
You're like Canadian because you sound American, but you write British.
That's Beth's life.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that. Commonwealth life.
I'm curious, how many languages do you speak?
Yeah, people always ask me this. Basically, I only speak Korean and English. I have a third undergraduate degree in French, but I don't go around saying I speak French. If I go to Paris and I can order a meal in French and I can read certain books in French, which is the whole reason why I studied it, because I wanted to read books in French. But I don't really say that I speak French. And the foreign language that I took in high school and college is Mandarin, which I really love. I think it's a really great language, and it's a really international language because I feel like standard Mandarin is designed to be spoken by many nations because there are many nations and peoples inside of China. So they needed a kind of language that everyone could kind of pick up quickly and speak. You can see the little design elements in the language where clearly it's meant to be easy to pick up second language for a lot of people. So I really like that international aspect of Mandarin. But that's basically about it. I don't like learning new languages. My thing is literature. I like reading books and literature. And to me, language is like the separate, annoying thing that you have to pick up in order to get to the literature.
That's still really impressive, though.
Yeah, and I don't think I've ever heard Mandarin being described as easy to pick up in my entire life.
Okay, no. It is easy to pick up like phonetically because the way you spell it, like it's the romanization is easy to pick up. You just have to memorize like 10,000 characters.
Yes, the opinion. Like the writing isn't so easy, but I feel like the grammar is, it's easier than Korean. I mean, all grammar is easier than Korean.
Did you like reading as a kid?
Oh, I loved reading as a kid. It was like my thing. When we lived in Ethiopia, I think that was like very formative for me because that came right after Hong Kong. So we went from this extremely kind of like country where like we can go to any bookstore and get like any English book and anything that you want to read, and then we went from that to Ethiopia where basically there's no television at the time. There was no television during the daytime, and there was only like brief television in the evenings, and there just wasn't a way to get books that you want to read.
For me, as an elder millennial, I also do remember a time when there was no Kindle and no smartphones, and I also like lived at the library during summer vacations, as well as the local chapters, which is like the Canadian Barnes and Noble. Shout out to anyone who remembers chapters. But
did Chapters file for Chapter 9? I'm sorry, it was right there. I had to say it.
Yeah. To my knowledge, actually, it's incredible. I think Chapters has persisted. I went back.
Oh, go Chapters.
Yeah, Chapters.
Yay.
Fighting the good fight.
Yay. Yes, we love our booksellers.
Yeah.
I also loved going to the library as a kid in Hong Kong, but I was really annoyed because you could only borrow up to 5 books only at a time. And then sometimes we would go to the US for the summer and they're like, you can borrow 50 books. I'm like, what? That's crazy.
What neighborhood in the US is this?
So I'm curious, like, what was it like in Canada or, where you grew up? How many books were you able to borrow at a time?
I don't remember. Do you
I think
remember?
it was virtually like unlimited. Like, I mean, maybe up to like 20 or like, it was like a crazy high number. More than you could really read at one time.
Wow.
I would have been so jealous.
I love that.
Yeah.
So I just want to say something shocking. Like in Korea in the 80s, there were almost no local libraries.
What?
Yes. There were no like municipal libraries that you can go. It's unimaginable now, but there were almost none. And so I grew up in Gwacheon, which had one, but you couldn't really check books out of it because it was they called it a 도서관, quote unquote, but it was really a 독서실. And so it was basically like 고시생 and, 입시생. They're just like students who are like studying for exams where you can rent out a carol for free because it's a public library. But they call that a library. So when I was growing up in the 80s, a library, quote unquote, a 도서관, in quote unquote, was really a 독서실. And there really weren't like reading libraries. I think it was during the 90s where like there was some kind of TV show with Yoo Jae-seok and where they were trying to promote this idea of having a library in like every neighborhood. And it was after that TV show where you started seeing municipal libraries pop up all over Seoul and Korea. But before then, you just didn't go and check out a book to read. That just was not considered something that educated people do. And when I did the yaja, the nighttime study hall thing that we do in high school and some middle schools, what happens was like if you're reading a novel during yaja, they would reprimand you or even like hit you because they're like, why are you not studying? Like, why are you reading a novel? But yeah, that's what it was like in the 80s and really the 90s as well.
Wow, I can't really imagine. And coming here, I feel like Koreans actually read a lot.
Yeah, that's something that like a lot of people have commented on. It's also in The Court Dancer by Kyung Suk Shin, where the diplomat Colin de Plancy, what was his first name? Victor Colin de Plancy. He kind of comments how like everyone in this poor country knows how to read for some reason. Even like a little girl living in a thatched roof house is reading a book. And I think that's the power of Hangul, really, like having this brilliant, accessible alphabet. And also, of course, being the country that invented movable metal type. Thank you.
I'm surprised to learn that you went to law school. How did you go from law school to being a translator?
Now, Korea University called it a law school, and it is a law school, a graduate program. But when I went, it was an undergrad program. I never intended to be a lawyer. Like, I had no romantic notions of being a lawyer or being like a judge. So for me, it never looked cool to me. It is cool. It just looked like a lot of work to me to do something that I didn't really want to do. Like, I've always wanted to be a writer. So I just wanted to do something that was literary. Basically, all the advice at the time said that, if like the most important thing is to have a room of your own, like what Virginia Woolf said, and some income and time and space to write. And so I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And so I tried to look for the thing that would give me the most time and space to write, and that was freelance translation. And then after I was a freelance translator for about 10 years, I'm still a freelance translator. I've been one all my life, all my adult life. I basically, in the middle of it, I was like, I would really like to maybe do literary translation because it just makes sense. It would be an interesting way to learn about publishing and to learn about literature without having to do an MFA overseas because I had a rent control apartment in Seoul. So I was like, I'm not going to give this up just so I can get some stupid degree overseas. So that's how I got into translation, basically. It was very strategic. And, well, it's kind of working out so far. So
You didn't start from, literary translator. You what kind of stuff did you translate? And did you do simultaneous interpreting?
Oh, yeah. I did everything. I like to say I did everything that you can imagine that you can do as a interpreter and translator. I've done escort interpreting. I've done simultaneous interpreting. And I did a lot of translation. And I just really loved my clients. This is before literary translation. I really loved my clients, and I really loved how they would just entrust you with their work to you, and I would always be just so honored and humbled by that. And so I would try to be to do my best work for them so that they could really shine, so I can make their work shine. And that was just it's a really satisfying life, not just in terms of money. And interpreters and translators in Korea still get paid a lot. When I taught at Ihwa, all of my students who taught at Ihwa make much more money than I do because most of them aren't in literature or publishing. I was very satisfied, very happy, and it was very lucrative. And then I was like, okay, literary translation, let's do this now. And then there was quite a bit of trade-off in that department, but I am still happy with how things turned out.
Yeah, you're very successful, and you're also a very prolific member of the Twitterati. On your Twitter, you mentioned your husband quite a bit. We know that you guys tied the knot in LA, right? How long have you guys been married?
We've been married it will be, God, I'm bad at math. I think it's 7 years this year. And then we've been together for 10. And we got married in the summer of 2016. It's really hilarious that I'm married because I never thought that it could happen to me, basically, for various reasons, mostly legal. And if you are well steeped in Korean literature, for example, marriage is really not a good idea the way that a lot of it's described. So I was very skeptical of marriage, but I'm very, very happy to be married to this particular person because he's just so supportive, and in a way that my family really wasn't. And so he really taught me what the real meaning of family is. And so I'm very grateful for that. And yeah, you should definitely, if you find someone like that, you should definitely marry them.
That's really endearing to hear. South Korea isn't, the most welcoming of places for gay couples, especially.
What country is?
Recently with the current administration. What would you say are some of the biggest challenges you and your husband face living in Korea?
I think the biggest really is I am afraid of either of one of us getting sick and not being able to access each other, the right to make medical decisions for each other. It would horrify me, for example, if my mother had the right to decide anything about any medical decision that I may need. And so I've left explicit instructions. I have a donor card. And so where, it says please contact this person and not, please do not contact this other person. But there's only so much we can do, and there's so much privileging of the heteronormative family structure that it's just very, very difficult to, and that's really what makes it difficult. And it's obviously not just, queer couples. It's also, for example, maybe you're a single person and you're living with a roommate that you're friends with and you're estranged from your family. There's so many different kinds of living arrangements and scenarios. Sometimes you want to, give your friend, the right to make medical decisions for you and the power of attorney, not your family. And sometimes you don't want your family to find you. Like maybe you are escaping from an abusive situation. And so what was really interesting was that Lee Jae-myung had this kind of a policy proposal in place on his presidential platform where people would have some kind of like cohabitation. I guess it's like the Pax Solidarité, like the Pax civil union thing that they have in France, where any two consenting adults can enter into some kind of social contract, some kind of contract that is recognized by the state where they could make decisions for each other and they could co-sign things and be prioritized over the heteronormative family structure. So yeah, we definitely need something like that, not just for gay people and queer people, but like for everyone, really.
You've been married for 7 years, and would you say that things have improved in terms of the public acceptance or the government's?
I think things have improved actually in terms of public acceptance. I mean, obviously, like City of Seoul right now basically is not allowing queer pride to happen this year in Seoul. But like a lot of people ask me this question, and I don't know. My family was more or less accepting, some more than others, but they have been more or less accepting. I mean, we all need room to grow, I guess. And all of my friends, they've been really great. They took it as like, oh, that's great. We get invited to all of the parties and weddings and whatever. So I personally think that in my case, they've been accepting, but I have a lot of privileges. So I'm, a cisgender man, and if I were born a lesbian, would it be the same? We have a lot of like privileges protecting us, especially as men, I think, and so I can't really. This is a question that you would really have to ask a woman or someone who is trans, I think, because they would be a better barometer for that. Mhm.
Yeah, and being on that note, we've also seen more openly queer-friendly content in pop culture, such as dating reality shows on streaming platforms. I don't know if you've heard of Marry Queer or His Man on Wave. But yeah, and you've written a lot about not just Korean literature, but K content and Hallyu and how that is, affecting Korea and Korean culture. Do you think that the queer Korean content has become more accepted in Korean society?
I think Korean content is way ahead of Korean literature in a lot of ways in this regard, because there's always been like from the Unitel Hightel days where you would have fanfic or slash fiction where people would write about queer relationships, that it would be like a way to express just queerness and queer relationships. And there are web novels and webtoons. There's always been queer content. I mean, there's always been queer literature in Korean literature. Since the earliest days of Korean literature, there have been queer characters. Like clearly they're very queer. But I feel like the way that the discourse has been repressed in Korean society, like a lot of it comes out in content where online platforms have really enabled the dissemination of queer content and the expression of queer desire in a much more protective and protected form. So I don't think this is a new thing necessarily. I think this is a very old thing that is finally coming into the mainstream more. I mean, even in the 80s and 90s, there's always been like queer movies or movies with clearly queer characters. I was watching this movie like 아담이 눈을 뜰 때. There's a queer character there. He gets killed off, which is, but that's very of the times. But the fact that this Korean movie has a queer character, that's something. Yeah, I think it's really great to see, and very glad that we're having not just more queer stories, but better quality, just more thoughtful, where they don't kill off the lesbian at the end. Like I hate stories like that. Yeah. So I think that's really great. Like happy endings for all queer people.
You've written extensively about the growing visibility of queer Korean writers. Obviously, you've been globally recognized for your translation of queer Korean literature, namely Park Sang-young's Love in the Big City. Can you tell us about what this work means to you?
I've written about this in places. I think the translator's note made it to Lit Hub. Until I read Park Sang-young, it never occurred to me that all the silly things that I did in my 20s could be turned into literature. But he does it so well. He's extremely honest. I think there's an expression in the book where it's like, oh, this author is like almost pathologically honest. And I think that goes for our dear Sang-young Park as well, who is not only an extremely talented writer, but he's also extremely honest. And he said in some podcasts, the reason why he is like that is because he believes that if you are so honest with yourself and honest with like what you are writing about, at some point you break through into a kind of transcendence, some kind of transcendent truth. And I'm like, that is so true. And that is especially true of his work. So I think it's really wonderful work in that regard as well. But also because I could look at all of the things that are in the book and I'd be like, oh my God, I know exactly where he's talking about, what he's talking about, like what situation this is. There's this line where this character who's on his way to Itaewon, there's a bottleneck. There's like a traffic jam going from, I think, Hannam-dong into Itaewon. And they give up and they get out of the taxi around the old CJ building. And then he runs the rest of the way to the club. And I'm like, God, I've done that so many times in my 20s. And it was just really funny to see. Just really funny to see this one thing that all the gay people used to do. I don't know if they still do it. I feel like they must have fixed that bottleneck by now, please. So yeah, it's just this feeling of being represented was very, very new to me. I wasn't really looking for representation. I just wanted to translate a really cool queer book. And that's how I kind of like decided to take on Sang-young Park.
Awesome. Yeah. And we've had literary translator Soje on the program, and they told us about 무지개 책갈피 or rainbow bookmark, and really opening our eyes to the fact that there is a wealth of queer Korean literature out there. And in your perspective, just your outlook based as a veteran literary translator, what is the current landscape of queer Korean literature today for you, and how has it changed since you first started translating?
I think it's extremely rich now. I remember when like the first queer short story anthology came out and it was crowdfunded. I think it's been crowdfunded for every edition. And we were all like, oh my God, there's going to be like this, anthology of queer, unabashedly queer literature. And so I joined in the crowdfunding, of course. And now there are like several editions, and it's just so exciting. And now it's just become this established thing where, oh, we're going to do another one now because, a year has passed. And so I'm like, oh yeah, let's do this. Let's do an annual thing where we crowdfund and, we can commission these short stories from these extremely talented writers. Let's do it. So it's been really great to see. Like I said, Korean queer literature has a very long history. Again, if you go to Rainbow Bookmark, like you mentioned, it's kind of shocking. You can see why Rainbow Bookmark exists. And I'm so glad that someone is keeping all of these books straight because there's just so many. And a lot of it is just explicitly queer books because some books are, you're reading it, like Soje and I would be reading it and we'd be like, this book is kind of gay. But there's no like explicit indication of other gayness. We're like, this character conflict would only make sense if these two same-sex characters were attracted to each other. Like otherwise, this is a book that makes no sense or is totally boring because it just feels artificial. Like the only way to make this narrative make sense is if these two characters are attracted to each other. And there are a lot of books like that on Korean literature. And I think it's part of what makes Korean literature so great. I think people tend to think of Korean literature as very conservative and reactionary, but there's so much subversive, edgy work in Korean literature. Korean authors do not follow trends for the most part. They're very idiosyncratic, and they very much march to the beat of their own drum. And I think, and that's kind of like what translators like Soje and hopefully me, we try to showcase. Like, We're so tired of people thinking of Korean literature as a certain way written by cisgender, heterosexual, middle-aged men writing about like when there were student activists in the 80s. No one wants to read that. Not even Koreans want to read that. It's not interesting. We want people to read, science fiction. We want to read queer literature like romance, content stuff like web novels, webtoons. Like that's what we want people to associate Korean literature with, not the other stuff. So yeah, there's definitely an agenda there. Mm-hmm.
For someone who wants to know more about queer Korean literature, where should they start? What are the top 3 works you'd recommend they read?
I think Rainbow Bookmark is a really great place to start. I don't think they have a separate English site. If we are talking about English, just English works, I think obviously we should start with Love in the Big City by Sang-young Park. So Words Without Borders, this online magazine, like they have a lot of Korean queer literature because we did a queer Korean literature folio one year, 2019, I believe. So Sojay put together this offline in-person reading event the summer of 2019. So there are pieces there that are very interesting to read. If I could only recommend like one queer Korean book that I feel like most people should read, it's Walking Practice by Dol Ki-min, translated by Victoria Cottle. And this is an extremely entertaining and edgy queer novel. It involves an alien that crash lands in Seoul. And in order to survive, they go on dates and then they eat their dates, like consume them. So it's extremely well written. It's excellently translated by Victoria. And when I got it, I first saw a draft of it in a workshop that Victoria and I were in. And I had brought I Want to Die, But I Want to Eat Tteokbokki by Baek to that workshop. So I was very proud to be like, I have the coolest book in the workshop. So I was like so happy when I went into the workshop and then I saw Walking Practice and I was like, damn, like I wish I'd gotten to this book first. Like, why did I not find this book first? So that's how much I like this book and this translation. Very exciting book, and I hope your listeners pick it up.
Can you tell us about any upcoming projects that you're working on?
Yeah, very excitingly, the current book that I'm translating now is I Want to Die, But I Still Want to Eat Tteokbokki, which is the sequel to I Want to Die, But I Want to Eat Tteokbokki by Baek. Baek, she's such a great writer. She's really, really just excellent, very clear, very honest like Sang-young, and also quite a queer ally. So I'm very, very glad to translate her work. The second book is a bit darker than the first book, so I think I'm going to recommend we do some kind of content warning. But it is very, very deep, and I think readers are going to really, really be affected by it. This year, we're coming out with 2 books, only one of which I'm allowed to talk about. 3 books, only 2 of which I'm allowed to talk about. First is which came out last month or 2 months, a little below 2 months ago. It's I Went to See My Father by Kyung-suk Shin. And this is, of course, this is a post-war epic. It basically covers everything from pre-World War II Korea to the modern day. It's the story of all of that comprised in like the life of one man. I love translating it. I love Kyung-suk Shin. The other book that's coming out this year is Counterweight by Duna. It's a science fiction book. It's coming out from Pantheon. And it's about AI. It's about colonialism, neocolonialism. And I really like the perspective that it has on AI because it's not mindlessly optimistic and it's not melodramatically pessimistic. It's very clear. It's like, yes, AI are probably going to take over large swathes of our existence, but are people going to panic about it? No, they're going to be totally casual about it. And what Duna predicted is coming true. People are totally complacent about what AI is doing right now, but then at the same time, most people are like, what are you going to do? Like, it's going to happen. And so it was very interesting to kind of like read that in a book. And it's also very exciting. I think it was like meant to be a movie, but it was then turned into a novel. And so it's very cinematic. And I hope a lot of people pick it up. You can also read it in one sitting. And I love books like that. It's very rare to have a book that's short. But nowadays it's getting a bit more common. But I don't want every book to be like a 350-page read. I do like books like that, but I don't want every book to be like that. But yeah, for a while, people were not, like publishers were not buying short books, but now they're beginning to come out. Walking Practice is another good example. I think it's below 200 pages, and you can read that in one sitting. So yeah, get Walking Practice, get Counterweight.
I'm really excited to hear that you're translating the second volume of I Want to Die, but I Want to Eat Tteokbokki. Is that the title? I want to die, but I still want to
Yes.
eat.
Yeah.
Really?
I know what you did last summer, and I still know what you did. Like, I kind of like when the editor told me that was the title, I sent her a poster of the I still know what you did last summer, where the word still is like ripped into the poster. And I was like, ooh, can we do something like this? And then she emailed me back saying, I know you're joking, Anton, but we are kind of doing something like that. So I got the cover a couple of days ago for the second book, and I'm like, oh wow, it's gorgeous. It's the same artist for the first book, and it's really, really gorgeous. And so I can't wait for people to like.
Yeah,
to
we
see
loved it.
Mm.
We
Great.
reviewed it in an earlier episode, and we'd be really excited to review it again. When is it
thank
coming
you.
out?
I think it's sometime next year. It's like I believe it's spring, but the way that Anglophone publishing works is that if they say something's going to come out in spring, then you could be like, oh, that means fall. Like, things just keep getting delayed. Like I wrote a novel and I sold it last summer, but it's coming out next summer. Like it's basically taking 2 years to come out. And so it's just the way that the game is done. But I think we do it in order so that we can have all the promotion in place so that we can really give the books like the push that they need. And sometimes it's like a whole process of like negotiating with authors and placating them. It's like, it's okay. This is good because it means that the publishing house takes your book very seriously and wants to allocate the most resources that it can to your book. So yeah, I think it's going to be next spring, but I'm not sure.
Can you give us a 30-second elevator pitch for your new book? For your book, original work?
Oh, I'm not allowed to talk about it. It's like, yeah, so publishing has a lot of these weird embargoes, like you guys know. So we are announcing it soon, like in the fall. But in order to maximize the impact, I guess they advised me not to leak too much information about it. So yeah, there were we're actually working on a lot of books. I'm translating 10 to 11 books just this year. And I'm only allowed to talk about like 2 or 3 of them at this point. So
Yeah, what's the
a lot of
site here?
exciting.
What's the
books
site here
to
about
come.
a BTS book?
Yeah, I'm not allowed to talk about it. I'm definitely not allowed to talk about that one. I would love to, but yeah, I think the idea is that we want to keep all the surprises and all of the things like under wraps so that, when readers get to them, they'll just be really, really happy to read the book.
We're really excited to see what's coming. And thank you so much for your time today, Anton. It was a really good conversation. And thank you for coming to Cover.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Before you go, we have a special shout out for one of our listeners, Erica from Amsterdam. Erica has started a monthly K-book club focused on women writers. If anybody's in the area and is interested in joining, her contact information is in the description. Here's Erica.
Hi, this is Erica from Amsterdam. I would like to recommend Almond by Son Won-pyong. It's my favorite Korean novel, and I find it fascinating because it's a very emotional story, but it's told from a perspective of a boy who doesn't feel emotions.
Thanks, Erica, for listening and supporting Cover to Cover. Please tweet us or leave us a comment if you have any Korean book recommendations, and we'll share it in our next episode.